What is the Matrix? Nobody can be told what the Matrix is. You must see it for yourself. A line of dialogue between Neo and Morpheus in the film The Matrix. A beautiful line of dialogue, a profound line of dialogue, and ultimately a line of dialogue that points directly to truth. Interestingly enough, there is another line of dialogue later on in the films from a character called Cypher, who points out, quite rightly, that Morpheus could have explained what the Matrix is. He could quite clearly have explained it to the characters pre the character's awakening. Morpheus could have quite clearly said exactly what the Matrix was. And if he'd done so, they would have never wanted to wake up. They wouldn't want to leave the Matrix if they knew the reality that is outside of the Matrix. Again, profound, beautiful, and true. Perhaps that goes some way to demonstrating and explaining the dilemma of the spiritual teacher. It's a tough gig. Morpheus had a tough gig, perhaps the toughest gig. The name Morpheus, by the way, comes from the Greek god Morpheus, who is the god of dreams, the god of the dream world, who has total power over the entirety of the dreaming, and therefore also has the power to wake individuals up from the dream. That's where they got that name from. Beautiful is that. I want to talk about the Matrix today. There is a lot of talk about the Matrix. It is a cultural artifact that has risen to prominence recently. It is a very current metaphor, story, around which there is a lot of discourse and discussion on the nature of society, the nature of culture, the nature of politics, and in certain spiritual circles, the nature of reality itself. People often speak about escaping the Matrix, how to leave the Matrix, how to get out. Or what is the Matrix? What's actually going on here? I just wanted to give a few of my insights, points, and ultimately, perhaps I can take the role of Morpheus right now. Except I don't have the cool sunglasses. Man, the aesthetics of that film were so dope. They were so cool, walking around in their trench coats and sunglasses. Man, oh man, oh man. Not as cool as Morpheus, but maybe I can be his like assistant manager on this one. Give him a little help to wake people up from the dream. How to actually do it? How do we actually do it? Well, I'm going to do what Morpheus could have done, but chose not to, and explain exactly what the Matrix is. Now, obviously, in the films, we have a very solid, very concrete science fiction description, explanation, and portrayal of exactly what is happening in a very physical way. The Matrix is literally a virtual reality simulation created by machines as a method of enslaving the human race to use humans for their energy, creating sort of human batteries, so to speak. Very visceral, very solid, very tangible, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's such an engaging, such an exciting series of films and story to kind of lock into, because it's something solid. We like solid, don't we? When something is solid with a clear explanation, we can jump onto that. However, this is part of the trap. We're always looking for that something solid, and the truth isn't, because the truth isn't material, the truth isn't matter, the truth is simply just this, just what is. So The Matrix, as a film, as a science fiction kind of template, we could see it as a metaphor, but it would be a mistake to think that we're trying to find ways to make that true. There's a lot of people that make that mistake, so that's the very first kind of pointing. If you're kind of trapped in this malaise of knowing that something's off, knowing that something's not quite right, and you've come across the concept of the Matrix, waking up from the Matrix, escaping the Matrix, and looking for as many similarities between reality and the film as possible, trying to kind of crowbar the film into reality. We shouldn't see it like that. We should see it as a metaphor. It's very good. It's very good. It just doesn't go the full way. Not quite. Not quite. Any metaphor is like a vehicle that takes you 90% of the journey. And any metaphor can only take you 90% of the journey. It cannot, by its own nature, take you 100% of the way. No metaphor can. Why? Because a metaphor is a story. And a story, by its very nature, I don't want to say it's false, but a story by its very nature is illusory. That's probably a kinder way of putting it. I don't want to be disparaging to stories or to the film. It does, it takes us 90% of the way, but ultimately is not fully satisfying because, unfortunately, we're not the cool characters with the trench coats and the sunglasses that can jump around on buildings. Yet. Maybe if we bang out a bit more spiritual awakening, that will happen, but it's not likely. And even if you could do all of that cool stuff with all the flips and everything, it wouldn't bring you any closer to awakening. Ramana Maharshi said that if you develop supernatural powers from your meditation, ignore them, disregard them. They are a distraction, and they will pull you further into the illusion. So even if you did gain all those supernatural powers, they are not truth in themselves. They are just another trick of the Maya. Let's take a look at the word Maya. I think the word matrix and Maya are kind of similar, perhaps because they both got two syllables and both start with M. I thought that's interesting. I wonder if there's some correlation between the etymological roots here. Got a strong vocabulary today, don't know where that's come from. Perhaps they've got two syllables, start with the same letter. So I wondered if there was a correlation in the etymology of the word Maya and matrix, and there's not, unfortunately. However, that did lead me to doing a bit of deeper research. The Wachowskis, who made the Matrix film, were very heavily influenced by Eastern mysticism, very heavily influenced by Hinduism. And so they clearly drew a great deal of inspiration from the concept of the Maya. What is the Maya? The Maya is the dreamed world. The Hindus figured all this out. The Hindus figured all of this out thousands of years ago, way before the YouTube non-duality scene came into effect. They all figured all of this out, and we're still just unpacking it to this day. C'est la vie. The Maya is the illusory world. And so, what if we could just gently shift focus from trying to understand reality as matrix, as a technological virtual reality simulation, which it's not, and instead move over into the Hindu concept of Maya, which is very similar. And because it's similar, it might be quite a comfortable little sidestep, not a jump, but a sidestep. And then we go, okay, so what did they mean by Maya? Interestingly enough, it has a few different direct translations. In English, we really struggle with translations of many Eastern languages because the English language is so solid. Everything's a noun, everything's a thing and a doing, whereas in more Eastern languages it tends to be a bit more flowing and a little looser, a little bit more conceptual perhaps. And the word Maya, we struggle with the translation. Sometimes it's translated as dream, other times translated as illusion, and sometimes translated as magic. It's magic. And there are different ways of interpreting the concept of Maya. They all generally stem from the same root of being the reality as an illusion. The reality we can see, the reality we experience, the reality we feel is kind of an illusion. But there's one very interesting aspect that really caught my eye, which was that Brahman, which is the universal consciousness, the one above in the Hindu mythology, from which all other gods kind of originate. Brahman is the totality, the whole. And Maya actually refers to Brahman's power to delude oneself into believing illusion is real. How beautiful is that? Anyway, so technically, let's just shoot straight to the end here. Let's just shoot straight to the end. I'm trying to develop this point so we can come to a satisfying denouement right at the end, satisfying catharsis, resolution. But let's just start right here, because this will bake your noodle, right? I'm in the business of baking noodles right here. And shooting straight to the end, you are Brahman. Ta-da, you are Brahman. There you go. That's you've achieved the final end state of non-dual consciousness, the true Advaita Vedanta. There we are. You are Brahman. And you're such a powerful being, because you're the being above all else, you have managed to delude yourself into thinking this illusion is real. Why do that? Don't worry about why. Don't worry about why. Why not worry about why? Because why is part of the delusion. This is the power of Brahman. This is just how many loopholes, feedback loops rather, that Brahman laid for himself or herself or both self, they self, themself, into believing in this perpetual, infinite, dreamed world. Beautiful. Anyway, that's the point we're going to end up at, but I'm going to switch back to using more matrix language, more modern language, more technological language. Let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. So, first up, many people begin this journey of looking into the matrix through the lens of a kind of critique of consumer capitalism. Fair enough. It sucks, right? And noticing that this whole system, this bizarre industrialized, mechanized system of education, this bizarre technological interface between politics, culture, social media, everything, it all seems to be a kind of interconnected web. And this interconnected web seems to be designed to subjugate you and control you. It seems to be a kind of system by which you are trapped and exploited, and part of the exploitation and the trap is that you get kind of brainwashed into consenting into all of this. The best way to manipulate somebody to do something is to make them think that it was their idea. Right, okay. So, that's kind of where we start when we start looking into all of this. And many, many people do clock it that there is something to that. There's something kind of off here. And so, we seek a kind of an escape from that, a release from that, because it's infuriating. All of your troubles, trials, and tribulations, you realize, hang on, all of this is unnecessary. I am abiding by somebody else's rules. Somebody else designed this system, and it doesn't work for me, and it just ain't right. There's just something that's way off here. So that's where we begin to try to leave the social matrix. Now, this is a good start. It's a good start. And I think the resurgence of interest in the Matrix is due to this inherent background intuition that something just ain't right. I mean, you can do this yourself. If you just check in with yourself, it's like, this just doesn't, I'm not sure if all of this seems right. Just something just, and it never has done. That's the other thing. You remember when you were a child, you first went to school? Were you one of those kids that was like, hang on, something here just doesn't feel right. It just ain't right. Now that's an intuition. That's a deep level of intuition. And naturally, the first thing that we go to is the human behavior, because we are plugged into the human world. So that's the first thing that we go to and start seeking to either leave that or change that. That's another kind of way in. However, both of those are a bit of a trap. And that's something that I don't hear many people talking about, but I want to be one of the voices that says, look, just hold on a sec, and maybe we take a look at what the true solution is here, because that's what we need, a real solution. Many people either try to disengage completely or get engaged in an attempt to change the Matrix, right? To actually be one of the agents, the Agent Smiths in the Matrix that kind of controls the whole scene and controls what's going on. Dear oh dear. So that's a mistake. And you see it all through social media and people talking. Everyone's angry and furious and not recognizing that it's the very anger, it's the very fury that is keeping them trapped within the very system that they are critiquing. It's a part of the system. Wheels within wheels within wheels. It's part of the manipulation, right? The best way to manipulate somebody is to make them think that it was their idea. And a lot of the anger and critique towards society, whenever I hear the word society, capital S, I'm like, oh, here we go. Because people are angry at society, not realizing you are society. You are society. And even if you're angry and railing against it, you are just feeding it. Sorry to mix metaphors, but a bit like the dark side in Star Wars. The angrier you get, the more you feed the enemy, right? So that's one thing. Try and fight the system, only to end up becoming the system. Dang. So what's the other way? Well, let's just leave. A lot of people, and the amazing synchronicity here, I've just noticed a little hut. People make these little bivouacs out here in the forest. I think they come and stay here for a bit or sleep or whatever. Wow. Synchronicity right there. That exactly brings me to my point. Thanks for reminding me, stack of twigs, that many people just try and leave. And how often have you heard this? When people are fed up, they've had a real tough week, tough month, tough year at work, feel like there's just something's way off, they're fed up with people, fed up with life, and with good reason, you know, I get it, 100% get it, and go, one day, I'm just gonna go get a hut in the woods and I'm just gonna go live out in the wilderness somewhere away from all this. Get away from it all, just leave. I'm fed up with it. Fed up with the whole system, the consumer capitalist, the whole shebang. This culture sucks and I want out. Fair enough. However, I want to highlight this as a bit of a trap in itself. Man, this isn't to be pessimistic, this is just to be realistic, and I will offer solutions at the end. I'm just pointing out many of the solutions that we try ordinarily, they just plain up ain't gonna work. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. You go out into the woods, you go out to try and live in an alternative way, a different way. I guarantee you could go to the most remote wilderness, an Alaskan forest, set up your hut. I guarantee some absolute bellend would set up a hut right next to you and would be just another source of stress, frustration. You can't get away from it, is what I'm saying. There is no getting away from it. Again, I'm not being pessimistic. This isn't to fall into despair. We're not falling into despair because there is a way. There is a way out. Right? The way out is to go in. Spoiler alert. You try and set up your forest in the woods. It wouldn't be long until they build a Starbucks. It wouldn't be long until they built a McDonald's. It wouldn't be long until a really loud, noisy, annoying family move in next door, despite the fact you've gone out of your way to live hundreds of miles from civilization. I guarantee it would happen. As quite a dark example of this, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber in America, he tried to leave. He was fed up with it, called it a technocracy, right? Quite a cool word for it. Fed up with the mechanized, industrialized way that we are kind of conditioned, made to live our lives, and so he tried to leave. He went and lived in the woods in a hut, self-subsistence. It was just hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle. And then a logging operation began near him. Huge mechanized industrial logging, where they were cutting down vast swathes of the forest. And the noise of the buzzsaw, the noise of the machinery, drove him to the very precipice of madness. Case in point right there, Ted Kaczynski. And then he lost it. He really lost it. We don't want to go down that road. It wouldn't work, is the point. So, doesn't that leave us in a bit of a pickle? Sure does. Sure does leave us in a bit of a pickle. However, as is so often the case in spirituality and waking up to the truth, the very thing that causes us to despair is actually the source of our greatest liberation. Our freedom is found in the very place that was causing us to feel so hopeless, so lost, so powerless. There is nothing you can do, nothing to be done, nothing. You can't change it, you can't destroy it, you can't escape it. So what's to be done? Let go. We must recognize the nature of the illusion in order to let the illusion go. There is no outside world. There is no matrix. There is no society. It's a myth. Surely not. Surely it's not that simple. It is that simple. Only you have laid down this deeply ingrained narrative that is keeping you stuck in the Maya. You want to get out? We need to examine that deeply ingrained narrative. What is that deeply ingrained narrative? The ego. The ego. The ego is the dreamed character, the protagonist of this story. Are you the protagonist of your story? Have you ever wondered that? Is your life a story? Does it have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Are there other characters in your story? Does there seem to be a narrative that's playing itself out? Have you ever examined this protagonist with all the wants, fears, desires, strengths, weaknesses, abilities and flaws? That protagonist, have you examined it recently? Where is it? Where is it? Where is this protagonist? In your head? Have you ever experienced being your head? Have you ever experienced being your brain? Or have you only ever experienced being the character? Now, who is telling this story? No one else is telling it. You tell yourself this story. And where do you tell yourself this story? In your imagination. The Maya. In the same way that a dream is in your imagination. The entirety of the dreamed world is also in your imagination. There is no protagonist. So there's no need to go live in the woods. There's no need to control, change, destroy society. And there is certainly no need to despair, because despair belongs to the character, and the character is not really there. Let go. Let go. Ta-da! Presto bingo, you're out the matrix. Maybe we didn't get it that time, so let's try a little further exploration. In the matrix, you are plugged in to the highly technologically advanced simulation through a plug in the back of the brain. And it's this plug in the back of the brain that hijacks the brain, that connects the body brain, the body mind. It's the interface between the body mind and the machine software program running, which is the matrix. And that's what can simulate sensations, feelings, the body, emotions, all of that kind of jazz, all of that malarkey. And that's a beautiful metaphor. I've used it before. That jack in the back of the head, that is the interface, because look, the person exists, the body mind being, we'll say, the human being exists outside of the matrix. The matrix exists within a simulation, right? If there's no interface, if there's no connection between the being and the simulation, that is, the being is freed from the simulation and doesn't have to do anything to the simulation. It's not important. Doesn't have to change the simulation, no longer has to leave the simulation, because the being was never in the simulation. It was an illusion. It was a dream. The being was never in the simulation. But in order to be fully out of the simulation, let's examine that interface, that jack in the back of the brain. The jack in the back of the brain is the ego, the deeply ingrained narrative, the belief that you are an individual, temporary, finite, separate self. The belief that you are limited to one body and brain. The belief that consciousness is generated by the brain, somehow produced by the body, and that this consciousness kind of projects outwards from the brain. That is the interface. That is the fundamental false belief that keeps you trapped in the Maya. That is fundamental. That is the fundamental false belief. When we remove that belief, that's the jack removed from the back of the head. Done. Job's a good one. The being is now fully removed from the Maya. Ta-da! Done. And this is where the metaphor of the matrix kind of breaks down a little bit, because once we remove the ego, once we remove that fundamental delusional belief, the simulation actually disappears, because the simulation needs a simulator. This is one of the reasons why people get very bogged down and convoluted when they're trying to understand like the matrix as a concept, and because it puts us in the same problem we're always in. Because if this is a simulation, we need a simulator, because it's simulated. So where is this simulator? And we're right back in that same problem of looking for God. The very same problem. Can't find them anywhere. In exactly the same way that we can't find consciousness. Where is it? We know it doesn't arise in the brain. Scientists have never found it in the brain. Where is it then? Where is this consciousness? What you are looking for is where you are looking from. St. Francis of Assisi said that, and I guarantee he never watched The Matrix, but he was spot on. It's exactly the crux of the issue. What you are looking for is where you are looking from. Where is the simulation? Where is the simulator? You are the simulator. You. It was you all along. Final point right here. Neo, upon his final, true and full awakening, and as we're here, right, Neo is a very interestingly named character as well. Neo means new as a prefix. If something is Neo, you know, like Neo Advaita. Easy, tiger. Neo Advaita means new Advaita, you know, Neo, we put Neo at the start of something, it means new. Neo cortex, right? It means the prefrontal cortex, the part that does all the thinking stuff. Could it be that that's what the word Neo is referring to? The neocortex, the thinker, the thinking mind? Possibly. Neo is also an anagram of one. The letters O, N, and E. Rearranged from Neo 1, he is often referred to as the One. The One. That's an interesting word. Anyway, at a certain point, Neo meets the architect when he has left the Matrix for good. He is fully ascended, fully out, fully gone, and he's looking for answers now. He demandeth answers. Goes to find the architect and has many conversations which wouldn't be out of place in a first year philosophy degree. Yeah, that's pretty much the nature of that conversation. Anyway, here is the crucial thing. One thing that I just wanted to kind of suggest as a slightly different way of looking at things is that the conclusion Neo arrives at is that the problem is choice. He says this is why this cycle keeps continuing and why we can never quite find balance. He says the problem is choice. That's kind of the denouement, the catharsis, the resolution of the films. The problem is choice. But I would suggest instead the problem is belief. If there was no belief, there'd be no ego. If there was no belief, you wouldn't believe yourself to be a temporary, finite, separate self, and you would be free to just experience being. No simulation, no matrix, no Maya, no problems, no more suffering. The problem is belief. And now here's the bit that'll really bake your noodle. Final point, point 5. Final point and a half. When we watch the film, The Matrix, naturally, we assume that we are the protagonist. Do we not? Is the protagonist of any story, of any film, not a substitute for the person watching the film? We always believe and identify with the main character. And the main character in The Matrix is Neo. So we assume that we are Neo. We believe that we are Neo. And so when we set about trying to leave the Matrix, we try to do it in the method that Neo did it. Perhaps seeking out a wise sage. In the film it's Morpheus, but in our case it might be one of the sages or some of the holy scriptures, some of the books, or just something, trying to look for some deeper answers. And sets about in a narrative in an attempt to leave the progressive path, one might say. But I would suggest changing the position of your identity. You watch the films, recognize that you are not Neo. You are not Neo in those films. That begs the question, which character are you? You are one of them. Which one? got it yet? You are not Neo. You are the architect. I think that'll do for today. The wind has picked up, and it's getting cold. I hope the breeze hasn't interfered with the audio too much. If you've enjoyed this talk, benefited from, resonated with, found interesting in some way, consider hitting the like and subscribe button. It'll only take a second or two. Channel memberships are available. If you want to support me in my work, join the Discord chat room. You find a community of like-minded individuals committed to awakening and gain access to my exclusive guided meditations. Some are based on Advaita. That'll really get you out of the matrix. And if not, no worries. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for watching for this long. I appreciate you. From one dreamed character to another. Take care. Be well. Stay